Hi, my name is Watson. Welcome. This is Shonen Spotlight. How y'all doing out there? Staying safe? I hope so. Things are getting pretty weird if the memes I'm seeing on Facebook are any indication. Me, I just got over a short bout of insanity. I mean, really, who would publish a top 10 list in 2020? Takes a special kind of stupid to do that. I think being stuck inside this long has done something to my brain. I mean, I've got 165 hours logged into Animal Crossing New Horizons, and the game's only been out for a month. Between that and Ring Fit Adventure, I think my Switch has gotten more use this month than all of last summer. Maybe by the time this virus passes, I can feel a little bit more comfortable showing off my iridescent torso. Anyway, while we were all tucked away from the literal plague out there, the anime season ended. It certainly was a span of 3 months, wasn't it? Really, outside of a few highlights, the past season was largely just okay. But now that we've got a little time before the new season really gets started and inevitably delayed, let's go back to a simpler time when you could walk down the street without needing to keep a 6-foot radius from the passers-by, where the bars were open, and when you could
take a jaunt down to the Nickelodeon to see the newest picture starring America's darling Charlie Chaplin.
Okay, maybe not that far back, but I really like that bit. So let me tell you about everything I've been watching this past season, from seasonal anime and films to some shows I cleared from my backlog. I'm going to section this up like a real-ass podcast, so if there's a part you want to skip, check the description for the time codes. Let's start with the seasonal anime. I'm going to rapid fire through the sequel seasons real quick. Ace of Diamond Act 2 ended its year-long run a few weeks ago. It's been a little bit since Jun and the gang have been with us, and I can't say I wasn't excited to check back in, but something was missing. The seniors, because, they graduated. I miss Chris Senpai and the other third years a lot. Their presence and support was the connective tissue that guided the team forward. The team as it is now doesn't really have that, especially the freshmen. And I'm not a huge fan of all of them. There are too many of them, and they take too much time away from Jun and Fuyuya's clash for dominance. Doesn't help that all the subplots stewing around feel disconnected. All of our beloved bad actors are still the same people they were in Act 1, just without anyone to tell them to chill out. Jun starts to understand this a little, as he should, it's his story. Otherwise, Act 2 was alright. I found it hard to pay attention 100% of the time, but I'm in this one for the long haul. Things ended right as the story was picking up with the summer tournament, and the games are the one thing this series never slouched on. Next season can't come soon enough. Haikyuu to the Top ends in a similar way. The difference here is it's the same team composition we all loved from the beginning of the series, and the animation is just as strong, if not better, than it was then. I've been reading the manga too, even though I much prefer the anime because I can't get enough Hinata in my life. This series is an all-time favorite of mine. If you're not watching it, you should be. It's so much more than just another sports anime. If you've been listening to me for a while, you'll know how I feel about My Hero Academia Season 4, or at the very least the part of the manga that it adapts. I went into pretty great detail about why I think the Shie Hasaikai arc is amazing, but what I didn't say then is it's really just the first half of my favorite part that I have decided to call the Eri Saga. The festival arc is the other half of that. It has best girl, best villain, and the emotional closure to one of the darkest points in the anime so far. I also didn't really go into how the animation staff was putting a lot of work into the second movie when they were also working on the first half of the season, which led to a lot of corners being cut in the TV series during one of the most important parts of that arc. Believe me, we'll get to Heroes Rising later, but the festival arc really brings it back for me. I can't wait for Season 5 when Deku finally gets to do something interesting. I love Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken. I already let you know why, so I'll keep this one short too. This is my anime of the year, and nothing will top it. It may only be April, but in the immortal words of Ron Swanson, I know what I'm about, son. It's a gosh dang treasure of a show, and commemorate is the greatest. If you need more convincing, please listen to the previous episode I made on this topic. I need more of this show. Okay, what else did I watch week to week? Smile Down the Runway was pretty good. It took the I'm going to be the best blank and you can't stop me shonen formula to the world of fashion for a really different take on it. Instead of focusing on someone with a problem you can conceivably solve through hard work and determination, we're introduced to a short model who's told she can't follow her dreams because she isn't genetically correct for the job. This girl Chiyuki is the best part of the series. And If this was mostly her story, I think I'd like this show better than I do. But they also focus on a poor boy and a tall girl both aspiring to be designers whose problems can be solved through hard work and determination despite the entire world telling them otherwise. This is a story that seems to want to have a happy ending, right? So every time the two designers get knocked down, it's not surprising when the story adds something to bring them back up, because despite their situations, what they want to do is not limited to the standards of beauty their bodies don't perfectly line up with. The melodrama the other two experience simply isn't as compelling as Chiyuki's struggle, and she takes a backseat for most of the season. The other two are just both so mopey. Chiyuki never shows a sign of ever giving up. She still gets emotional, sure, but she sticks through it because she's determined to see her dream to the end. The other two look like they're gonna cave the next time someone looks at them wrong. I mean, they don't stop chasing those coattails in the end, but they make it really hard to root for with those woe is me looks. Is it worth watching? Yes, I think so. It kept my attention most of the time. Despite its mostly weak main conflicts, Smiled on the Runway has a lot of heart behind it, and the characters have a passion for their thing that rivals other shonen stories. The show knows how to show tension and is able to let the performances and outfits dazzle despite some average animation at points. The secondary cast has a lot going on as well, that a lot of the time is more interesting than the main plot. I'd gladly watch another season of it. That's not true for the case files of Jeweler Richard. What initially seemed like a finely aged wine of an anime turned out to be boxed and sold wholesale. Jeweler Richard follows a beautiful white man named Richard who works as, well, a jeweler, where he appraises gems and fixes people's problems by relating it somehow to the meaning of the gem he was presented. I'm all for episodic character dramas, but you have to make the characters interesting for that to work, you know? The first half of the episodes really are compelling when they focus on Seigi, the college student with a heart of gold who finds his way into Richard's employ, and some one-off characters with entertaining tales to tell, but as soon as they start going into Richard's history, I lost all interest. Richard is a guarded and mysterious type of guy. Learning more about his past in an attempt to humanize him reduced his character to a boring version of Maximilian Pegasus, complete with a "I'm totally straight, guys, I had a girlfriend once" backstory, deflecting all of the sexual tension between him and Seigi that they had been subtly hinting at, like how a bear subtly mauls a deer. That decision reads more like a response to avid fandom rather than any meaningful development. Not to mention, the last episode comes straight out of left field with a jarring deadbeat dad story. In fairness, that episode had more of my attention than the previous three, but only because I was stupefied that this was the direction we'd swerved into, not because it was particularly good. But I was able to watch the whole thing, unlike Toilet-Bound Hanako-kun. Moving on, I'm not done talking about sports anime. There was another one I've been watching since last fall. Ahiru no Sora, which I believe translates to Duck Lips Basketball, is more or less if you took Sakuragi's delinquent posse from Slam Dunk and made them the high school basketball that our Shoyo Hinata stand-in has to convince to play basketball because despite his short stature, all he wants to do is play high school basketball. This shorty is named Sora, and I like him. He's the plucky, hard-working sports protagonist working with the pair of threes life dealt him. The way he was able to win the others over through his sheer passion is the reason I love sports anime. The problem is mostly with the others' personalities. A lot of them are terrible people that have had very little growth in the last 26 episodes, especially the one who's missing teeth and the one who looks like Chucky from Rugrats all grown up and found a comb. They call him Chucky too. I'm not even kidding. There's too much of the teenage boys are horny humor in this show about basketball. Too many times the captain is doing something borderline predatory as a gag in the first few episodes that feel like a product of the early millennium this manga began that really hasn't aged well. And we just got through the longest practice game against the cousin of their student coach who really wants to play the Alabama dating game, if you catch my drift. It's this kind of thing that makes this show feel like a chore, to be generous. The other three on the team are alright. Momoharu and Toby are great characters with a lot of depth, and I'm sure Kaname will give us some more when he has some time to stretch. And Captain Chiaki has some too when he isn't preoccupied. And this show uses its cast reasonably. It doesn't find a way for this brand new team with almost no collective experience to win just because they're protagonists. The basketball parts are done pretty well, even with a lot of it is stiffly animated. Kuroko's basketball this decidedly is not. Plus, they've started to build up a rivalry with a serious basketball team, led by a kid voiced by Kazuya Nakai. And I've been pretending Zoro got so lost he joined a high school basketball league. We're halfway through this one, but I'm not sure I'll make it the rest of the way. Next up is Darwin's Game, the newest entry in the anime Death Game collection. This time, it's an augmented reality game that grants its players a special ability called a sigil and encourages them to murder each other for substantial monetary gain. It's all schlock all the time, and I loved every minute of it. I need smart shows to keep my brain turning, but I also need big, stupid adventures every now and then. With all the other things that were mildly disappointing this season, I could always count on Darwin's Game for some big, dumb, bloody fun. I didn't think about why I loved this show while I was watching it because it doesn't want you to think about it. That's not to say it doesn't try to have a compelling story and characters, because it does have that. It just doesn't want to try too many things outside of its use of AR. It's some good, familiar territory to lose yourself in. Id Invaded, on the other hand, is a big dumb adventure that wants you to think about it. It drops you in the middle of this big sci-fi police story as an excuse to have spectacular visual metaphors depicting wild settings to dissect the psyche of the latest murderer the Force is hunting down. They also try to have a bigger mystery surrounding the machines that let them do this that's one part too obvious to surprise anyone who's looked at the poster of a rogue cop movie, and another part so far out of left field that I just accepted it and moved on because I stopped caring about that mystery after episode 2. Really, for most of it, it didn't feel like the show cared too much about the mystery either and wanted to focus on its cast and their issues. I just came to accept the fact that cops in this world can track the residual murder particles left at a crime scene and use captured killers to dive into the mind of an unknown suspect to figure out who did it and find him with 100% accuracy. Who needs to know the whys and hows? You already committed to crazy, just roll with it. Seems way more efficient than forensic science anyway. But it also just drops you in the middle of it, like it wants you to be curious and pay attention to the bonkers science fantasy it's trying to make sense of. After 3 episodes, I got enough information to process it, and at that point, it had me invested in Narisigo and Hondo Machi enough to keep me going the rest of the way, even when the rest was going off the rails. Narisigo did nothing wrong, and this world does not deserve him. I'm gonna buy the Blu-ray as soon as I can. This past winter, I also saw a lot of films in theaters, and half of them were anime. So let me just blow through what I gave Hollywood money for. 1917 is a World War I film that wants you to believe it was all done in one shot, but it wasn't, and you know it. I like the attempt at something aesthetically neat, and the editing is admirable, but I think I'm over this time period in films. I don't know what more I can get from these films that can't be accomplished by looking at photographs of survivors in a history textbook. Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn was right to have the theaters advertise it as Harley Quinn Birds of Prey after like a week. Aside from being a mouthful, the top-billed supergroup plays second fiddle to the crazy psychiatrist for most of the movie. Margot Robbie is an amazing performer, and her Harley is so much fun. Admittedly, I'm a die-hard DC Comics fanboy who grew up on the original Justice League and Teen Titans cartoons, and I want their movies to do well. I love the risks Warner Brothers is letting their brand take that Disney's homogenous MCU just wouldn't. Birds of Prey, however, doesn't want to do more than be a big loud ride, introduce some badass bitches, have Harley be Harley, and let Ewan McGregor chew the scenery. I only have one nitpick, and it really doesn't mean anything if you've never read the comics, so I think this film did a fine job for a wide audience. Sonic the Hedgehog is exactly the script outline I thought it was going to be. It also has some heart and Jim Carrey, 6 out of 10. Pixar's Onward joins their forgettable middle-of-the-pack movies like Brave and Toy Story 4 in the I Was Almost Something Great club, with some good ideas surrounded by poor execution. Now, for something completely different. Masaki Yuasa's Ride Your Wave joined the I Was Almost Something Great club with some good ideas surrounded by poor execution. The first half hour is a really strong and grounded love story that Makoto Shinkai wishes he could do in 90 minutes. And the remaining hour is a really weak, grieving story that spends an unhealthy amount of time in the bargaining stage and dabbles in the supernatural with no lead-up. It feels like 2 different films. It's like the worst parts of a Miyazaki film and a Hosoda film all jumbled up together with Masaki's distinctive visual style. Really, the worst parts of those movies are better than most films in general, so the result is still a very watchable product, and the intended emotions were felt at the proper times. It's just, there are too many times I questioned why things were happening on screen after a half-hour version of what I'd compared to the opening of Pixar's Up. But where Up deals with grief and finding life after loss by meeting new people and realizing the good old days were not as good as you thought, Ride Your Wave thought it would be a better idea to do it with a waterbending ghost and a super rote hero subplot. I just expect a little more tonal consistency start to finish in a film. As for Shinkai's film Weathering With You, it was good. It wasn't Your Name, but it was good. I've come to the realization that I'm not a fan of Shinkai's works. 5 centimeters per second? More like 5 millimeters per hour, am I right? That's comedy, ladies and gentlemen. Your Name was a great bait and switch on the Freaky Friday formula that takes the humdrum day-to-day of 2 high school kids and ups the ante with a reasonable sci-fi twist that no one saw coming. Weathering With You seems like it wants to recapture that magic, but it's too busy developing its secondary cast and explaining its magic to make the 2 leads all that interesting. I'd much rather have the focus of the film been on the sad dad or the middle school playboy than the downtrodden lover boy and his sunny girlfriend. The entire third act of the movie, I was thinking how much I'd rather be watching Penguin Highway, because as soon as they start explaining their mythology, you know exactly how the rest is going to play out. How they get to the point you knew they were going to end up was entertaining though, because the secondary cast was there to give it that little extra nudge. And I have to give props for going another 10 minutes or so after any other movie would have stopped just for a little Shinkai cheese. But I don't see myself watching this one again anytime soon. Speaking of films I'll never watch again, I decided to watch the 3rd Dragon Ball Z film while I had food poisoning. That's really all I have to say about that. Promare feels like a film made for a middle school audience. The story is basic, it's loud and boisterous in animation and soundtrack for the entire 2-hour runtime, and it's begging to be made into a toy line. For all of these reasons, I had a really fun time with it. Studio Trigger is good at making fun experiences like this one, and I'm starting to think they should stick to films where they don't have nearly enough time to spin their wheels before turning their main character into a spaceship. It also helps that Promare knows it's a stupid basic story that you've seen a billion other places, and it knows it can play with your expectations a little. Couple that with its 80s pastels and its inability to not do something cool at all times, and you've got a winner. Liz and the Bluebird is the polar opposite of that, and another film I put on as my stomach prevented me from moving more than just a few feet at a time. I bought it last July, and it's been collecting dust on my shelf ever since. I didn't realize it was a Sound Euphonium film until Taki-sensei showed up, which was a pleasant surprise. I really should finish season 2 at some point. Liz and the Bluebird is a really good character study that I had a hard time devoting my full attention to. Now, whether that was because my stomach was doing flips or because it moved so slowly that I was checking the time code every 10 minutes, I can't really say. I should give it another chance when I'm more in the mood for what it offers. The last anime film that released last year in Japan that I saw this year was My Hero Academia: Heroes Rising. I'm a little on the fence about this one. On one hand, it's a really good filler story with some of the best filler kids ever written, and a lot of Class 1A fan service with nearly every character getting some time in the spotlight. Shoji and Sero especially get to play around in ways that canon material hasn't given up enough time to do. It also showed my friend who didn't see why Bakugo is objectively best boy the error of her ways. On the other hand, the main villain is boring and is outshined by most of his cronies, and the climax, while being a gorgeous showcase of what Studio Bones is capable of, made me roll my eyes so hard I thought I was going to sever my optic nerves. I think I audibly said, "What?" in disbelief when I realized what they were about to do, and by the end of it, of course, they brush off all consequences this could have possibly had with a hand wave and amnesia. It's a series finale kind of thing that doesn't feel like it should be in the second movie, but at the same time would be one of the stupidest ways to end the story. I enjoyed the first film more as a complete package. It knows it's a film, and doesn't try to be clever with its premise so it can get to something the manga will never show you. Heroes Rising tries to be canon and make sense with a plot that could conceivably happen in the manga, and it's distracting how poorly they follow through. I still had fun though. As a piece of popcorn media, it does its job. It really doesn't want you to think about what's happening, because as soon as you do, you'll ask why the school thought it was a good idea to let a group of unaccompanied high school freshmen run a hero agency on a small, remote island with their world in the state it is. It's just a shame that this was the reason Mirio's fight was reduced to a slideshow. That's all the new stuff. But there were a few things in the backlog I finished that deserve some recognition. I watched Oresuki, Are You the Only One That Loves Me, Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun, and Agretsuko Season 2. And I don't have anything to say about them aside, Agretsuko is the best of these three and everyone with a Netflix subscription needs to watch it. Netflix is also the home to another couple shows I finally got around to. Violet Evergarden is one of the most beautiful TV shows ever made. As a Kyoto Animation anime, it's obviously going to look good, but it's also beautiful at the story level, telling the tale of a broken girl as she tries to understand the unconditional love she was given. What I didn't know when I started this series was it's mostly episodic, and unlike Tricky Dicky Gem Guy, most of the stories it has are strong, and I was bawling during episode 10. This is a prime example of a show Netflix is shooting themselves in the foot, releasing all at once. I couldn't sit through this series in one sitting, and I can't recommend anyone try. It's emotionally taxing and needs some time for you to absorb the feelings it gives you before moving on. I could only do about 3 episodes a day. The same can't be said about Beastars. I finished all 12 episodes of that in one sitting. It's the kind of show that pulls you in and 6 hours later you remembered you put some clothes in the washer that need to get to the dryer before you go to bed. Is it as horny as you've heard? Yes, definitely. Don't watch this show with your parents or anyone else you would feel uncomfortable watching a rabbit girl and a wolf boy making advances on each other. But it doesn't feel out of place. The world of Beastars is a developed world like ours, but as it's filled with anthro-beasties, it's far more bloody. If the Nature is Metal subreddit needs a more personified story to enjoy the unending nightmare that is our beautiful reality, this is it. The carnivores who would naturally prey on the herbivores have to rely on other means to get their fix without succumbing to their natural urges and being ostracized by society. That alone gives the show enough psychological weight to keep things rolling, and some racial undertones that aren't always one-to-one with the real world, but are clever enough to make you think. Every animal each character gives the show its own visual language anyone can understand. The golden retriever is a loyal and excitable friend, the sheep is a timid girl that resigns herself to a fate immediately, and the endangered rabbit with a striking fur pattern is a huge self-absorbed bitch. This naturally extends to Legoshi, the lone wolf, and Haru, the other rabbit who, likes dick. Which, to the show's credit, is a point that they make sure to inform the character instead of just leaving it as some furry cheesecake, which it also very much is. Not shaming, just stating facts. If Beastars just scratches your need for a psychological kick to the testicles, then might I recommend Satoshi Kon's Paranoia Agent, which was recently released from licensing Limbo when Funimation posted bail. This 2004 series was one I had heard in passing multiple times when I was starting to watch anime regularly, and is one of Satoshi Kon's 2 forays into television, and the only one he directed. He's mostly known for his films such as Tokyo Godfathers and Perfect Blue that use an incredibly realistic visual style to tell usually heady narratives on the human condition. Paranoia Agent does not stray far from his wheelhouse. A serial assaulter appears on the streets of Tokyo, leaving his victims with only some serious head trauma and the story of a middle school boy with a bent baseball bat and golden inline skates. The 2 detectives assigned to the case suspect the original victim of falsifying her report until it becomes apparent something far more terrifying is at work. In between the episodes that further this plot are a lot of standalone episodes about the other victims of the attacks or those indirectly affected by them. Each one is incredible. There is not a single episode that made me want them to get past the filler and put Lil Slugger, as the media dubs him, behind bars. These episodes are some of my favorites, chief among them Episode 8, Happy Family Planning, and Episode 11, No Entry. It builds Lil Slugger up as some kind of fear operative or anxiety representative or something. There's probably a more elegant way to put that. The whole show is a metaphor on how the little lies we tell ourselves every day can lead to messy self-destruction if we're unable to face facts in the end. Truly a masterwork for any era. Finally, there is one show I'm sorry to say I slept on until its first season ended. That show is Ascendance of a Bookworm. I've been trying to keep my intake of isekai anime to a minimum ever since my doctor told me my cholesterol was getting too high. So for the fall 2019 season, I decided I had to limit myself to 2. I picked up Kemono Michi and Cautious Hero. We all make mistakes. What's important is that we use these mistakes to learn and grow. Bookworm is a show that needs every episode to be 40 minutes long. because it never feels like it has enough time in 22 minutes to get your fix. That's something I haven't felt since the first time I watched my favorite anime of all time, The Eccentric Family. A lonely girl who lived for nothing but to read wakes one day to find herself in an unfamiliar world, in an unfamiliar body, after being ironically crushed and killed under a mound of books. The world she finds herself in is medieval, and the only thing she craves is a luxury afforded only by the high nobility. What's more, the body she now hosts is sickly and young and belongs to a poor family that barely know what a book is. So Mine, as the girl is now named, has to use her knowledge of advanced technologies like making soap and paper to attempt to create a book of her own. The story falls somewhere in between Dr. Stone and Spice and Wolf. Like Dr. Stone, Mine uses her past life knowledge of household crafts to better her life in this relatively primitive world. Like Spice and Wolf, this isn't an empty place, and there are a lot of dealings in economics and politics that flesh it out. And like many other isekais, this world is dependent on a little magic to remind you we haven't just gone back in time. But there's a lot that makes Ascendance of a Bookworm stand out from the hundreds of Stuck in Another World anime pumped out every week. Not the least of which starts with the OP. Its alternating 4/4/5/4 time gives it the feel of music that would have been popular during that time. Mine is a brilliant girl who is easy to root for, with her single-minded resolve and clever but naive navigation of social situations. And there's the added wrinkle of her need to keep the fact that she is a college graduate that now inhabits the body of a 5-year-old girl who had a life before she took over. It's like the longest and most stressful improv game where if you break character, you die. If, of course, your own body doesn't beat you there. Mine's body is slowly dying, likely for the second time before another consciousness took over. But she takes it in stride and does absolutely everything in her power to survive to eventually get back to reading anything she can get her hands on. Her family and new best friend Lutz are wonderful as well, even when they understandably, unknowingly sabotage Mine's progress. Her dad is almost a Maze Hughes type, and if the technology was there, he would certainly have a photo album in his wallet of his 2 daughters. It goes a long way to help stay hopeful for Mine with this support network in place. Now, if I have to be critical, I'm not a huge fan of the art style. Everything looks too clean, and you could use this as a great example of same-face syndrome in your anime production graduate class. But really, that's not anything close to a deal breaker. There's a lot to love here, and I obviously have so much more to say about this show than any of the others I've watched recently. Ascendance of a Bookworm should be on top of your watch list, especially with the second season starting now. Oh, good lord. I've been recording for almost an hour at this point, and this script is going on the 9th page. There's not enough time to talk about the manga I've been reading, and especially not enough time to discuss everything that's been happening in One Piece that I need to let clumsily spill out of my stupid mouth. So, exactly what I've been doing for the last 3 months. Speaking of which, to all of you still there, thank you for listening. I hope I was able to keep your mind off stuff for a little bit. If you want to keep up with me, I'm on Twitter at Shonen Spotlight. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast too. I'm on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, your favorite podcatcher, and YouTube. And you can follow my Instagram, Shonen_Spotlight, for updates on the content and pictures of my borderline irresponsible collecting habit. Anyway, there's a lot of new anime I need to start, and another script I need to write about them. My watch list is a lot longer this season than it has been in a while. I'll be back in a couple weeks. Don't wait up. There's a whole world of anime out there that you can safely watch from your couch. Until next time, see ya.